You today to the fourth in a series of 5 webinars hosted by the National Association of Invasive Plant Councils during National Invasive Species Awareness Week. We will answer questions at the end, so if you have a question, type it out in the question box, which should be located on the bottom right-hand side of your computer, and submit it. You can submit it both during and after the presentation, but we'll wait till the end to answer them. Remember to join us tomorrow at 3 p.m. For the Don't Move Firewood presentation that we will be giving by Lee Greenwood. If you could join us tomorrow, that would be great. Today's presentation is by Chuck Bargeron, and it's titled EDDMapS, Smartphone Apps, and the NAISMA, or North American Invasive Species Management Association, Mapping Standards. Chuck Bargeron is the Associate Director, Invasive Species and Information Technology at the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health, and has a public service faculty appointment split between the Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources and the Department of Entomology at the University of Georgia. He has been with the University of Georgia for 17 years, where he has developed web applications, smartphone applications, interactive CD-ROMs, databases, and outreach publications. Thanks, Chuck, for being here this afternoon.
No problem. Thanks, Sherry. I've been helping host these all week, so it's a different thing having to actually do the presentation myself. So if anybody has any problems hearing me or anything, then please let us know through the question box as well, and with that I will get started. So as the title was, today I'm going to talk about EDDMapS and smartphone apps and the NAISMA mapping standards. If you've seen me do a presentation before, you've probably seen some of these slides, but since we were updating and adding new things to EDDMapS up to about 15 minutes ago, then there will be something new for you as well. So the Center for Invasive Species or Ecosystem Health is referred to as Bugwood a lot, and we actually started, and that was our name. It was the Bugwood Network until February of 2008, when that changed to the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. And as I told my 4-year-olds preschool class yesterday, what do you think of when you hear bugwood? And it's insects, and then the wood comes from trees, and that's really where we got started, was looking at entomology and forestry, and that is really morphed into looking at invasive species of all taxa, as well as integrated pest management and forest health. And what we really strive to do with the center is work across agency, organization, and discipline boundaries, and really combine science with technology to make available tools that could not be easily created otherwise. So here's our logo. The center logo is the 4 arrows, and the concept of that is these are different disciplines as well as information technology coming together to serve a need, fill a need, provide a role. So before I talk about EDDMapS and some of the smartphone apps, I really have to kind of back up and kind of tell you how we got here. And I think it was in 2003 or 2004, Chris Evans, who's one of the organizers of Monday's webinar, was working for the University of Georgia in our group. And while he was here, he was hiking at Kennesaw Mountain, which is north of Atlanta, and he came across this patch of garlic mustard. And it was considered to be, at that time, the first garlic mustard recorded in Georgia, and the Georgia APSI, along with other groups, got together and did a garlic mustard pool and bagged up a whole bunch of garlic mustard, had really good before and after pictures of the site, and a huge trailer full of garlic mustard that they pulled up. And from there, that continued. The National Park Service got involved, and we thought, wow, this is a great example of early detection and rapid response. And as that went on, we later found out that a botanist named Scott Ranger had actually found that population back in 1989, and a graduate student at the University of Georgia had done his master's work on the population. But because of change over of the rangers at Kennesaw Mountain and just the involvement of different people in programs in the state, that knowledge was lost until many years after the control effort had started. And another example of kind of why we did EDDMapS was the sacred ibis, a bird in South Florida. There's a very active eradication program going on to support the eradication of that bird. There's been sightings along the way, and APHIS Wildlife Services works to eradicate those birds when they see them. And so just remember that, and we'll come back to that later. But the other thing we noticed was there were lots of databases out there, and there were lots of networks and lots of programs like the Plants Database or Biota of North America or Flora of North America, that look at, hey, what's the distribution of all the plants found in the United States or in North America. And then there's regional programs, Invasive Plant Atlas of New England and Mid-South, as well as other databases that were kind of built for certain purposes. But none of them were necessarily all talking to each other. And when you have a lot of different databases, you have a lot of different maps. Depending on what the purpose, depending on the data source, different ways to look at the distribution data of species. Here's an example of Japanese honeysuckle in Georgia from the Plants Database as opposed to the Forest Service Forest Inventory and Analysis data. And as you can see, there's a big difference in where the populations of Japanese honeysuckle are. And so this is a map I always like to show. Here was what Japanese honeysuckle distribution looks like according to the Plants Database in May of 2013. And, the general knowledge for anybody that lives in the South is, well, honeysuckle's everywhere. And the problem is that people don't necessarily take records, herbarium records or literature records of honeysuckle because it's so common. And so, what is a major problem in the South, is not adequately displayed that way on a map. And when it comes to, recording data and saving that data, there's a lot of ways to do it. You can go out with a notepad, or you can have some more high-tech, devices to collect the data. But ultimately, in the past, we always had to get into ArcGIS. And if you're not a GIS person, which I am not, then, opening up this interface and trying to figure out what layers and what, different data sets and shape files and all are can be a little overwhelming. And so, what we wanted to do was come up with something that would help solve these problems. And so a few years before this effort really got going, the North America Weed Management Association, which is now the North America Invasive Species Management Association, one of the things that they do as part of their association is develop standards. They have standards for weed-free forage, they have standards for weed-free gravel, and they have mapping standards. And so going back to 2002, and I think it was actually even before that, they had developed and released the North America Invasive Plant Mapping Standards. And those standards came with a lot of acceptance. All the major federal agencies had signed on to them, as well as the Federal Interagency Committee for the Management of Noxious and Exotic Weeds, as well as different counties and states. And the mapping standards were really to be designed to be compatible with most invasive species inventories, provide the minimum standards, And, as I always like to say, what you really need is what species was it? Where did you find it? Who found it? How large was it? And when did you find it? If you've got those basic components, that's basically what you need for an invasive species, any kind of occurrence database. And so the original standards were there to kind of, provide that basis for weed inventories. And so with the name change from Weed Management Association to Invasive Species Management Association, came a new mapping standards, and our group at the university, as well as others throughout the country and into Canada, worked to update these standards to make them more all taxa and to simplify them a little bit as things have changed since 2002. And so in September of this past year, the new standards were approved by the North American Invasive Species Management Association. And what was really done was some of the fields were clarified, the definitions were cleaned up. There was some removal of some fields that weren't used very much, addition of fields to accommodate all taxa reporting, addition of fields to accommodate biological controls, and just ways to make it easier to enter the data in a database, in a smartphone app, or show it on a web map. And the specifics, there were some survey standards that were duplicated of the kind of occurrence standards, and so some of that was cleaned up. We added some fields such as identification credibility, and we standardized the location information to be decimal degrees for latitude and longitude. And where programs may still capture data in other systems, it's very easy to convert to decimal degrees. And by having it on decimal degrees, it's very easy to map it onto systems. Some of the other changes that were made to the standards were the addition of a taxonomic serial number, which goes into the integrated taxonomic information system, which is a U.S. government database of taxonomic information. A number observed for animals and wildlife, that would be similar to infested area, and then the sex of what the animal was, if that's known. Other fields that were added were life stage as well as host species, because for biocontrol agents as well as for plant pathogens and even for insects, it's important to know what host the species was found on. So those standards have been updated and really help provide a basis for what any invasive species database and most invasive species databases use. And the other thing that happened about the same time that we really got started with the EDDMapS project was Google, the Google Maps platform had been out there, but Google released a Google Maps API that allowed users to overlay data onto the Google Maps platform. And this really became, the driving force of what made EDDMapS possible, I would even say. It made it very easy to show distribution maps. It made it very easy to overlay data. And as the standards, the API has improved, very fast as the data with EDDMapS has increased. So, going back to what we needed, what we really needed was a common operating platform for invasive species data. And, some of that's provided by the mapping standards, and others is just provided by having a central location where data across agencies and across formats can be shared. And then also, what was really missing, especially for invasive plants, but other taxa as well, is an easy way for electronic reporting. And so that's really what EDDMapS was created to do. And be that national platform for invasive species early detection and mapping. Provide an easy way for users to enter information originally through their computer, on locations of where they saw invasive plants or invasive species, and then provide a way when those reports come in that they go through a verification process. And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. So EDDMapS was launched with the Southeastern United States focus in 2005 with the motto "Invasive Species Mapping Made Easy." That's kind of was what we tried to do from the beginning: simplify the process, make it where professionals and citizen scientists alike could really contribute to the system. And as I've already said, the NAISMA mapping standards are the basis for EDDMapS and for most all invasive species databases. So this was the EDDMapS website until recently. We recently went through a facelift, and now we have, if you go to eddmaps.org, this is the interface that you're given with a kind of a slideshow here of some of the different features. This we've moved to a format that allows the website to degrade and work better on mobile devices, such as both tablets and smartphones alike. And one thing that's really been unique with EDDMapS is it's really been about building partnerships. EDDMapS would not be possible if it was not for the support from the U.S. Forest Service, at the national level and at the regional levels, as well as the National Park Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Army Corps of Engineers, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, as well as USDA, NIFA, which was formerly CSREES, and APHIS, and other partners such as the Nature Conservancy, private companies, as well as individual states, universities, and state agencies. And this picture is a little gross, but it was a cane toad picture that was submitted through EDDMapS, and it really illustrates a good point that we've tried to solve with EDDMapS. And that's that, it's very difficult for both federal and state agencies to cross the fence. It's difficult for a Forest Service database to show data from the National Park Service. It's difficult for, the Georgia Forestry Commission to have a database that includes information from Georgia Department of Ag or Georgia Department of Natural Resources. And so what we've really tried to do with EDDMapS and with Bugwood and our center as a whole is to work across the fence and not have those jurisdictional boundaries in what we're showing for the data. So EDDMapS, and this will make even more sense when we start looking at the smartphone apps, but EDDMapS has really been broken up into regions. We have some state-specific projects. We're also sharing with some state-specific programs like the Texas Invasives Program and the Alaska Invasive Plant Program, and programs like Cal Flora in California. But the rest of EDDMapS has been kind of broken up into regions because of branding and because of just focusing on species. And so you've got EDDMapS West, which is represented in the blue states, the Great Lakes Early Detection Network, of which we're a partner in, which is represented by the green states. The orange states are the Invasive Plant Atlas of New England, which was a project that preceded EDDMapS, but then became integrated into EDDMapS when when USGS NBI program dissolved and there was no longer a home for it. The yellow states represent the Mid-Atlantic Early Detection Network, which was built in those states as part of a project with the National Park Service. And then the red states represent kind of where EDDMapS got its start, which was the southeastern states. And if you zoom on out, EDDMapS is also doing some work. We've set up some pilot projects in the Caribbean, and have also done work in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, and have a very active program going on right now in Ontario. But with all of this technology and all of this, you need some pretty strong infrastructure behind it. And so, just for any techies that may be involved, EDDMapS is running on the Adobe ColdFusion platform. It is very integrated with our Bugwood image database system, which is forestry images, IPM images, weed images, insect images, as well as our wiki. And there are actually two replicated Microsoft SQL Server databases that provide the backbone database. And now we're actually running an ArcGIS server in the background to provide some applications and some utilities that previously were not available. But the honest truth is, in some cases, we're reaching the capacity of what we can do using this technology. So we're in the process of moving EDDMapS and most of the other Bugwood websites into the cloud, specifically using Amazon Web Services, which will provide larger bandwidth and access to the information and to the reporting, as well as because of the way Amazon is set up through this CloudFront system. The data is distributed across the country into different data centers, and depending on where your location is, it will depend on where the data is being served to. So let's look a little bit into the EDDMapS and how it actually works, and some of the projects. I think we mentioned most of these earlier, so I'm going to go through that. We're also doing some work on biological controls through a project a project called iBiocontrol. The What's Invasive project, which was a project that started in California, was another process where it was part of an NSF funded center. The center went away, and EDDMapS ended up pulling that database into it and now hosting the project. We've also worked on some other projects. There's an Outsmart invasive species app that was done for Massachusetts that we've been involved in and are hosting the data for. The New Invaders Watch program was another program in the Chicago area that also predated EDDMapS but became part of EDDMapS because we were able to provide the IT infrastructure and save them having to deal with that headache so they could deal with the outreach. I mentioned some of these data partners earlier, but I want to bring them up again. The Bureau of North America, we've been working with John Cortez a good bit lately to make sure that our data in EDDMapS as well as the data in Bureau of North America match up, and he's been helping us with some of the taxonomy with that as well. So a big thank you to him. And then the Alaska Exotic Plant Information Clearinghouse, we've been a data sharing partner with them for a long time, as well as the Texas Invasive Program, the Cal Flora program in California, and we're also a partner with the Global Invasive Species Information Network and a mirror for that network as well. We'll be starting in the next year a project with through the Smithsonian and Encyclopedia of Life. They're working on a project to consolidate a lot of citizen scientist programs, and that data is going to be run through EDDMapS to help provide verification and make sure that some regulatory pests don't fall through the cracks. Some of the ways that EDDMapS is expanding kind of outside the normal invasive species side of things. We're going to be launching a project called EDDMapS IPM that's going to focus on tracking agricultural pests, both native and non-native pests. We're working on a project called Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities with the Nature Conservancy, and are building a smartphone app to help with urban tree health monitoring. We're working with the Nevada Department of Agriculture on an app to record and maintain rangeland health. And then we've also got some other projects to track the spread of rose rosette disease on different rose varieties and cultivars, and a way for tick reporting that's also going to integrate with the diagnostic labs to help with testing for diseases. So one of the projects that I mentioned was the Mid-Atlantic Early Detection Network, and so For some of the examples I'm fixing to show, I'm going to use that as an example, but these features are mirrored throughout the entire site. So if you go into the website, you choose a state, then you choose what you would like to report, whether it be a plant, an insect, a pathogen, or wildlife. And you're given a pretty standard reporting form. You start typing in what species you're looking for, whether it be common name or scientific name, and it gives you a drop-down list you can pull the species from, and a picture as well when those pictures are available. Scrolling down on the form, you're able to zoom in, choose a state, choose the county, zoom in on the Google map. You can either enter the latitude and longitude and it zoomed there, or kind of find the place on the Google map and place the point. You also can now draw polygons or polylines directly on the map as well. And as you do that, it will actually calculate the infested area for you. Scrolling on down on the form, you can choose pictures to upload along with the record, as well as have some information on who took the photo and a caption for the pictures. Scrolling on down on the form, you have a place for comments, and if a voucher specimen was made, which is really important, especially for new finds in the state or county, if that was made and where the specimen, what herbarium that specimen is found in. So when that report goes in, you get an email saying that it's being sent to the county or state or county verifier. Everything in EDDMapS now goes through a verification process. That was not the initial way we did things, but we decided that that's the best way of doing things. But you're able to go into the My EDDMapS tab, see the record, edit the record if you made a mistake. We also have just recently pushed an updated revisit system where you can actually see the initial point or polygon and then draw additional polygons or polylines, as well as put information about what was done, if it was a treatment that was done. But this will give us a good way to, over time, track the change in the size of the infestation and even show pictures of the site over time. The next big trick that we're working on is integrating this into your smartphone, so you'll be able to see points around you and provide revisit information for those points. Other features of the My EDDMapS section of EDDMapS is you can create and manage alerts. You can administer projects if you're a project administrator. You can download your data, and the verification system will be more tied into this when we launch the new verification system that we're currently developing. So the example, I reported Chinese privet in Maryland. The Maryland state verifiers are currently Jill Swearingen, Curry Cod, and Mark Frey, and so they would have received an email. It knows not to send it to them if it's from me because it's a test record. And so they would have received an email. If there was a county verifier set up, then the county verifier would have also received an email. And what they're given is a interface that looks sort of like this, where they can go on, see the records that have been reported, view the record, see the pictures that go along with it, and then fill out this form to review the record. They have different ways they can put the verification method, and then if they check reviewed, verified, and released, then the record is made public in EDDMapS. We decided it was a good idea to kind of streamline and kind of wireframe this out. So just to give you an idea of how it works. So you've got data coming in from all different sources, web forms, smartphone apps that we'll talk about in a few minutes, embedded web forms, as well as the reporting API. And then you also have bulk data that's coming in, either as one-time dumps or from our data sharing partners. And so all that data is fed in and goes in as a new report. Once that new report comes in, then the system looks and sees if it is a regulated pest or a non-regulated pest. And so if it's a regulated pest, if it's an insect that's considered, regulatory by APHIS or by the State Department of Ag, then those reports are sent directly to the state and federal agency contact for that state. For non-regulated species, then the you can go in and look at it. The reports will go out either at the species to a species verifier. For example, for kudzu bug, Wayne Gardner with the University of Georgia is doing all the verification for those records, and so those records where it's not a regulated species would go to that species verifier. Or, as I mentioned before, for many of the plants, you would have a location verifier that could be at the state level. It could be at the NISAW or CWMA level, at the county level, or if it's part of a Corps of Engineers project, then it may be a Corps verifier. If it's a national park, it may be a national park verifier. Or if it's a specific project, then it goes to the project verifier. And if it goes through all this and it doesn't fit in any of those categories, then the record is sent to us at EDDMapS so we can track down a verifier and track down somebody to review the record. This is an example of a tool we're working on. We're still beta testing yet, but the concept of this is that you'll be able to choose a subject from a drop-down list and drop a point on the map, and it will tell you who is the verifiers for that species, whether the species is regulated, has it been previously recorded in that state or in that county, and then what projects or currently support reporting it, as well as what invasive species list is it on. And we think once we get all the data into this new system, this is going to be a very powerful tool to use, both to just see, who the contacts are. We're going to remove the email addresses, but who the contacts are, and whether or not it's something has been reported in that state already or not. So more on the new verification system. Because of some requests from our verifiers, we've added a way where you can very quickly mark something as pending or picture a request or delete or incorrect. This way, if you have multiple verifiers and one of the verifiers is contacting the reporter to obtain a picture to go along with the record, then they can mark that, and so two emails, the effort wouldn't be duplicated. We've also built in a way to bulk verify records. If you know the reporter and you know that they're good at identifying the plants or whatever species it may be, you'd be able to go in, select multiple records, and do a quick verification of those so those records can be available. So once a record is verified and released through EDDMapS, then we send out alerts. I think I looked earlier today and we were over 50,000 alerts have been sent out. And those are alerts that users sign up for on the website. So when a species is verified and shows up on the map, then they'll receive an alert based on the settings they set up through the system. And then also it shows up on the maps. Those are state distribution maps, county distribution map, Google Point maps, as well as an ArcGIS map and any custom maps that are used to view that data. And any data feeds, any data sources that take the EDDMapS data and use it, such as the Global Invasive Species Information Network, the data would also be available to them. Quickly, I want to show you a new form we've been playing with for a group in the Pacific Northwest, and it's a survey reporting form. And the concept of this is you're going out and you are doing a survey of an area. And so, there's some general information that's the same for all the records you're reporting. You may go in, and in this case, I drew a polygon here to show the area that I'm surveying. So that, is your gross area for where you're surveying for the plants. And I did that, and it calculated, that was about an acre that I surveyed. And then you scroll down, I can start dropping points on the map. And as I drop those points on the map, then it gives me a reduced reporting form where I can fill out the species name and whether treatment was done and select pictures to go along with it. And so we're doing this. There's some required fields as part of this project, but the concept of this is to allow you to if you're doing a organized survey, allow you to very quickly, put some points on the map to represent where the species were found. So before we get into the smartphone apps, I want to show some success stories. We mentioned the sacred ibis, or mentioned the sacred ibis earlier, and Judd Patterson with the Park Service was on his lunch break one day, and he saw what he thought was a sacred ibis. He reported it through EDDMapS, and the report came in. Tony Pernis with the Park Service got an email. He was actually at a conference in Tallahassee, but got the email, got on the phone, and called APHIS Wildlife Services. And within a few hours of the report being made through EDDMapS, the bird was removed. Other success stories, and I'm stealing this from the Indiana program, but since they launched a specific report in is the name of their system for EDDMapS, they have found black swallowwort and has been reported in 2 new counties. They found the first known infestation of Japanese stiltgrass in a state park was reported, as well as the first population of Japanese chafeflower north of the Ohio River counties was reported, as well as the first population of plumeless thistle in Indiana. So within a little over a year, where EDDMapS has been fully launched in Indiana, there's been all of these new reports, including a new state fine. And somebody said we're having some audio problems, so hopefully y'all can hear me okay. But another unintended fine that happened was there was a bug in the Android app that if you didn't have location services turned on, then it defaulted you to the middle of Kansas. And so the Kansas noxious weed coordinator, Scott Marsh, received a few of these emails that were all in this same location. He said, okay, well, I just better go check it out. Where it turns out the actual reports did not lead to any, none of the plants, those were all mistakes. Those were all, wrong location. But when he was out on the property, he actually found what was the first known occurrence of Italian plumeless thistle in Kansas. And so one of those cases where, hey, well, no, these random reports were not actually right, but in the process, the first known occurrence of an invasive plant in the state was found. And going back to the Japanese honeysuckle map, now we have full coverage for the state of Georgia for Japanese honeysuckle. And Karen Rollins with our center actually went to, I think it was Long County that was the holdout county, and went and found Japanese honeysuckle in that county to complete the map, because we knew it was there, it just hadn't been reported. So on the mapping side of things, you can go in to EDDMapS and you can choose, you have the option for county maps, point maps, and lists. Here's an example of a county map zoomed into the Mid-Atlantic states, for in this case for Tree of Heaven. We've now built tools in where you can embed these maps into your websites. We've had a static link to the map, as well as a way to dynamically embed the map. And we have it where you can share the maps on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Pinterest, Blogger, and via email. So you have a bunch of different options. Why you would want to necessarily share a map on Pinterest, I do not know, but the option is there if you're a big Pinterest fan. One complaint we always had was being able to easily download the maps, and so we've worked out a solution for that. And this is an example of a map that was created by clicking on the download map link. And as I mentioned early on, Google Maps really, the advancement in the technology for Google Maps has really helped us move EDDMapS along. And here's an example of where there's 4,000 points for Tree of Heaven, and we're using clustering and using other technologies to be able to make those quickly show on a map. And when you click on one of those points, it pulls up and shows you the full information about that point. With the addition of polygons into EDDMapS, now you can go on, click on a point, and when you click on the point, if a polygon exists, then you're able to see the polygon once you click on the point. We didn't think it made sense to try to render the polygons on the map, but when you can click on the map, you can actually see where the polygon was drawn. And this was some data done with the digital aerial sketch mapping, and it's even amazing looking at the polygon versus the Google aerial photography, how close you can tell where the Brazilian pepper is under that polygon. Another new feature as part of the Army Corps of Engineers project we're working on is to be able to go in and look at a Corps project and see what invasive species are found in those project boundaries or surrounding those project boundaries. And so in this case, you click on it, you can zoom in, and you can see all the species within 5 miles of Lake Okeechobee, and you can change that to up to 30 miles, and as you can see, you get a lot more points. You can toggle on and off the top 15 species or scroll down and see all the species that are found in that area. Moving along, we've also built in, this is the ArcGIS interface where you can view the map using the ArcGIS server. Some new maps we're working on. We've always kind of had these species reported maps where green is illustrated that the species was found. We're now going to be soon implementing a new map that will show you, okay, well, was the species reported there in the county? Was it just an observation? Is it based on literature or a herbarium record, or is it based on both? And so here's an example of what that map would look like, showing 2 different colors. Another map type that we're implementing is a density map, so you can really see the density of reports for a species based on the darkness of the shade. And with everything, web technology is always changing, and so you're now able to do very fast rendering of different map types on platforms where you don't have to do some of the clustering that you previously had to do. We're also looking at ways to indicate whether or not a species has a picture to go along with it. And if you look at this example, there's a little camera in there showing there's a picture available, and the star represents that there's a polygon available. And we're not sure that this is exactly what the final interface is going to look like, but a way where when you're looking at points, you can see, oh, well, that one's got pictures available with it, or that one has a polygon to go along with it. And then also showing different color points for whether the species has been treated or not. The last map we've played around with and we haven't been really happy with the results is a heat map where you could kind of show the density of the species based on kind of the heat map concept. This map, and I think it's just a neat thing to show, is the density of data in EDDMapS, and it just shows where, not only Minnesota, Oregon, Utah, and Nevada really have collected a lot of data, and in some cases also have big counties, but just where the data gaps are and where there's good data coverage for different parts of the country. EDDMapS has over 2.6 million records in it now, with about 1.7 of those million of those records being actual points. That's covering over 4,600 species. We've had 7,348 different data contributors to the EDDMapS system, with 24,000 registered users. We received 10 million hits last year, and that was from 879,000 different visitors. On the tools and training page, I want to just point out a couple of features. One's the advanced query tool, where you can go in, select, I want to see all the tamarisk and Russian olive in Clark County, Nevada, and it creates that map and then allows you to download that data as well. One new feature that we actually are finishing up right now is a way to view species by congressional district. So you could go in, choose your congressional district, and show what plants are a problem in that district. A tool that hopefully Congress could use to help see what problems are in their individual districts. As EDDMapS has grown, we've started working with different partners. Here's one for spotted wing Drosophila. Just a way for them to report, when it showed up throughout the year in different parts of the country. Kudzu bug, because it was caught early, we have a good distribution map of its spread, and it really is a good example of how things can work. And then again, those maps can be embedded, and here's an example of that map being embedded on another website. We've also built ways to embed the reporting forms, and here's a few examples of brown marmorated stink bug reporting that's been integrated into NC State and Rutgers website. Another cool example just showing over a season the spread of a species, and here's an example of that, as well as using EDDMapS data to really show the expansion of a species. Here's rush skeleton weed, and if you watch it, you can see its expansion within Idaho and then down into Utah. And sorry, I'm talking a little slow, so still got a little bit I want to cover, so we'll keep moving forward on this. Here's a map. I joke that this is the map of where you don't want to visit in Florida. Here's where all the large constrictor snakes have been found. But actually, those constrictor snakes, the Burmese python and others, led to us. And here's just an example of what a python has to eat to get to be 13 feet long. But those pythons led to us venturing into the smartphone app world. And when the iPhone was released, it was this ultimate digital device, and this could be this could go on to other smartphones as well. But it was sold as as a phone, a music player, and a internet communicator. But what it really also is a mapping tool, a camera, a GPS unit, a camera, a field notepad, as well as a reference book. And so all of that goes together to really give you the ultimate, always with you, pest and invasive species reporting tool. So we started pulling together the resources we had through our different bugwood systems, whether it be the content in the wiki, the images, as well as the EDDMapS backbone. And it made it very easy for us to move into developing smartphone apps because we had that core infrastructure already in place. Because the apps have to work, they have to be able to talk back to a web server that has that verification network for identification and for action. So the first smartphone app we did was for the snakes in Florida. We took a field guide and made it into a smartphone app. Honestly, as the lead developer on it, I'll say it didn't work great, but it got a lot of good publicity. And from that, we worked with the National Park Service to build what became the I've Got One app. And it was called I've Got One because it was a telephone number in Florida for reporting pythons that was 188 I've Got One. And so we took that branding, took it over to the phone, and then expanded it with working with the University of Florida to include plants as well as animals in Florida. And we ended up building it for the iPhone and then expanding that to the Android devices as well. So all the different apps and the features I'm going to show you are all available on both the Apple Store and the Android Store. We now have, I think the number is 26 apps available covering a lot of different topics. Some of them are reporting apps. These reporting apps now mostly are moving into this dashboard feature where you can go in, view species by category, view state lists, do negative survey reporting, as well as create your own list within the phone. And just to click through and show you what it looks like on the different devices, here's, you break things out into categories or look at all the species. You can select species to be part of your list. You're given a very simple reduced reporting form that allows you to have the lat long, how much time you spent collecting the data, as well as the area and density of the location. With these latest releases, we've built the ability in to draw polygons as well as points onto the smartphone, and you can do that by dropping points or dragging your finger along to create a more rounded feature. The state list has only been implemented in EDDMapS West, but we're going to expand it to the other regional apps as appropriate. The negative reporting form allows you to go in, select species, and show the area surveyed, and then that data goes in as negative data into the system. Everything is stored in a report queue, and then you can wait till you get into the office or on Wi-Fi before you're reporting it to save the data usage and to make the reporting go a little faster. One of the problems we had was not having the registration form built into the app. You had to go off to a website to report it. And so now that has been incorporated into the apps, as well as just other information on the program is tied in there as well. And I'm just going to click through quickly. The Android interface looks very similar. You're able to, is basically the same, but tailored to the differences between the iPhone and the Android interfaces. So it feels like it is and feels like a native app on the iPhone, and it is and feels like a native app on the Android devices. And if you have either device, then you can go to the store and search for the apps and pull them in. For the iPad, you're really given the bigger screen where you can see the detail and the pictures that's available. You've got a little bit more room on the reporting form, and it really works out well for the polygon drawing because you've got such a big area that you can go in and really draw a detailed polygon. So I mentioned before the EDDMapS West incorporates the state list, so you can look at the state noxious weed list. We've also built an app called for the National Park Service that allows parks to go in and set up their park-specific list, and then the reports go to the park managers as well as the state coordinators. I've got some examples here, and I'm going to go through them quickly of just some field guide apps we've developed for forest pest insects. An example on the iPad again, where we took a 700-page book and converted it into an app that you could download, search, and view the high-resolution pictures. And it scales down to the phone very well as well. We've also been working, kind of in a related field with going back to agriculture to build some identification keys. The first one we did was for stink bugs, where you could go in and based on the characteristics of the stink bug, then you could help determine which stink bug you had and view pictures to go along with that. And that actually is currently being implemented for a project in Alaska and in Montana to help with noxious weed ID. The final app I want to mention is the Georgia Cotton Insect Advisor. This is a tool that allows you to go in and based on the week of bloom and the percent damage by the stink bug, it gives you recommendation and the additional related pest, it actually gives you chemical recommendations. And I think, this is really getting into a decision support tool that I think ultimately will have a lot of possibilities in terms of what you can do with a mobile device. So that's the smartphone apps. We've gotten a lot of over 60,000 downloads now for the iOS platform, and probably about 15,000 downloads for the Android platform. I think that's pretty successful for the market we're looking at. But even better is we've seen from 2012 into 2013 and then 2014 that we're really starting to see, more reports coming in from the smartphone apps than from the web interface. And honestly, it's just because it's so much easier to do. You don't have to bring all the information back and do it on your computer. Some other things I want to mention briefly, and then we'll go into your questions. We've been working with the Forest Service to fill in some of these national county maps and collect data throughout the country. And so, anytime you are on EDDMapS and you see a map that has that something doesn't look right or you have a question about, please let us know, because we're really looking for your input to make sure these are as correct as possible. We've also been working with a contractor, Becca Van Campton, out of Idaho, to build some GIS interfaces into EDDMapS, and we're starting to do some really cool things with that you're not able to do using the normal tools available through Google Maps. We've been working a lot with the California Invasive Plant Council on figuring out ways to take the concept that they did with Cal Weed Mapper, where they did consensus expert knowledge quad-based mapping throughout the state, and then able to use that for some predictive mapping. And so we're hoping to move that into something that we could expand into EDDMapS and into a larger audience. Finally, I'll mention a partnership that we have with Invasive Plant Control, and what we've been doing with that partnership with Invasive Plant Control is
Hey, Chuck, I don't think we can hear you.
Yeah, I know. I think it's back now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, now I can.
Yeah, there was some glitch, and so sorry about that. There was something with our internet connection here, and so I was pausing, hoping it would come back, but I think we're back now. So the IPC Connect product is something we've been working with Invasive Plant Control on to add in the ability to do daily site sheets and management tools. We initially built it with them for their company, and now it's expanded to include. We've expanded that and working with the New Jersey Invasive Species Strike Team, as well as some groups in Wisconsin. Okay, Sherry, you can hear me okay? Because I'm getting static.
I can now, yeah.
Okay.
I can hear it in the background, but I can hear.
Okay, let's see if we can get through this. Sorry for the glitches. Hopefully everybody can hear me again now. The last few points I wanted to make is, really the success of this. You can build all the tools, all the cool technology that you want, but without the outreach, you're not going to have a successful program. Tying in multiple species, tying in plants, animals, insects, everything you can into one platform really works. Florida is an example of that. EDDMapS Ontario is definitely an example of that as well. Having the branding that you can put on bumper stickers on billboards, and it helps with both awareness and with reporting. One cool thing that's going on right now as part of the National Invasive Species Awareness Week is Florida is actually doing a non-native catch, click, and submit contest. And so using the smartphone, I've got one smartphone app and EDDMapS, users are able to go in, catch fish and report them. And at the end of the weekend, of this coming weekend, then there's going to be prizes that are going to be awarded to for different categories of fish. And so, the Apple Watch is coming out soon. I don't know that there's necessarily a way to integrate that into invasive species reporting, but we are looking at other things such as push alerts to the phone. Those will be coming this spring to the apps, and this is obviously a joke, but the breeding population of Burmese python found at Disney. But that concept, being able to push new alerts out to users, as well as looking at ways for gamification. And because of the technical problems, I'm going to skip over that, but just making it more fun for users to report things and building that community around those users. We're also looking at ways to, the state of Florida does digital aerial sketch mapping, and it's very expensive, both because of the flying, obviously, but also because of the technology involved. And I think we're going to get to the point where tablets could be used, iPads could be used to do some of this work. And I think drones are really going to play an important role for species mapping in the future, depending on what the regulations end up being. And the Google Glass project is kind of dead, but I found this slide from this company that was, looking at ways it could be used for agriculture. And I think, just this concept of being able to have something you wear, maybe it's not Google Glasses, maybe it's something else, but you could see what points have been reported around you. You could see other information about the area that you're in, and maybe even could make reports without even having to pull your phone out. So a few key points, and hopefully won't lose me again. EDDMapS is available now. It's fast and easy to use. We're looking to aggregate data, not replace data from other systems. I mentioned we're working toward complete county level distribution maps, as well as the point maps to complement that. It's really meant to be a tool to facilitate early detection and rapid response. It can be used and integrated into existing programs. It was built to be customizable. It is free to use. We have a long-term commitment from UGA as it being a key product of the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. So it's not going to go away anytime soon. States do not have to buy into the system. The cost for the different products that we do provide are all based on, for customizations or custom interfaces or custom apps that you might need tailored for your program. But the goal of the project is to make the data freely available to anybody that wants it. I mentioned already, the I've got one model really works, but that requires, working together within a state and getting everybody on board. And here's a picture that a dear friend of mine and mentor, Les Merhoff, had asked me to take of the naturalist sign outside the Museum of Natural History in New York for a presentation he was doing. I stuck my son, who's now 9, I guess, in front of it when he was 4, and it became kind of the poster child for the future generation of naturalists, because those future generation of naturalists are growing up with these iPads and iPhones and Android device tablets in their hands, and so I think the possibilities are really limitless in what the future may look like. So, my questions for anybody who's still on is, how could this help your programs? What features would help you? What features are needed? How can this tool be better used for both professionals and citizen scientists? How can we use this as climate change becomes more and more of an issue to track the changes in distribution based on climate change? And, where are we going to be in another 5, 10, or 20 years? And so I want to thank again the different groups we've worked with to make this possible, as well as our team here at the center. There's a good group of us, and if it wasn't for the expertise of the biologists and the programmers on this, none of this would be possible. And so there's my email address if you have any questions beyond the ones that are in this question box. And so all week I've been reading these and then responding to them, but today I guess I'm going to be reading them and responding to them. And so, oh,
Thanks, Chuck, for that presentation. That was excellent.
no problem. And sorry, I went so long. That's unusual for me, but I wanted to make sure we cover. I usually talk too fast, but um, so I'll go through and see if I can answer any.
Can I ask you one quick question?
Yes, go ahead.
How would, looking at that map that you showed of North America, there's a number of provinces and, well, a few provinces and states that still are not using this technology. How would someone go about introducing that to them?
Yeah, and that map is a little bit deceiving because we have data from for the U.S. states anyway. A lot of those states we have some data from. There's
Mm-hmm.
just not really an active program in those states, and but it could be very easily. They could jump on to one of the existing programs, or what I would say is, start building. They could work with us, start building the outreach program, and that's really how the data, you know, you start getting data coming in. I mean, Florida is really the poster child, and years ago, um, between us and the Nature Conservancy, we went to each of the SISMAs in Florida and we did presentations on using this technology. And going to that local level is really where you get the buy-in and the interest into the program.
So if they would contact you, could they contact you?
Um,
Those other
yes,
provinces?
yeah. I mean, anybody could contact us. I know that British Columbia has a pretty active program. We just need to work with them to add, you know, to get their data integrated, and that would fill in, some of that. I know we talked to Quebec at one point, and the language, things needing to be in French, complicated things a little bit, and we didn't get very far yet. But
Right.
we've got some projects. We're looking at some pilot projects in Europe where with multiple language interfaces, and so I think that's going to be another future expansion of EDDMapS, and I would also like to expand into Mexico as well because I think that would be the next logical place.
Right. Thank you.
No, let's see. Looking for. Okay, had a question about an SDM utility for EDDMapS. If you could explain to me more of what you are asking, because if I know what that is, then I'm drawing a blank right now. So if you could expand on that, I'll be glad to answer that. So question saying, my understanding only EDDMapS in Florida collects data on animals. Why doesn't EDDMapS track animals in all states? We have recently opened it up where you can report other animals and insects and diseases in other states as part of EDDMapS, and that's tied into making sure the reports go to the correct regulatory officials. So that is definitely it was more of making sure that if the report came in for something, it went to the right person. And so Florida was very, very, up. There's a lot more invasive animals in Florida that are really causing problems and are good poster child. So that's why it started that way. How does EDDMapS deal with multiple reports in the same population submitted by different people or in different years? We have looked into some of that. There's not as much of that as you would think, but with where I mentioned, I think maybe after this question, but the next iteration of smartphone apps are going to be able to look at where you're at, look at what species are around you, and then you be able to, and then it say, hey, are you looking at this species that's already been reported by somebody else, and then you would report it as a revisit to somebody else's report as opposed to a new report. I, I don't, unfortunately, don't think it was the crazy ants that were taking down the lines. That would be nice. So I have a question about the IMAP invasives program, and that is the similarities to EDDMapS. And yes, there's some differences. And what's the likelihood in these two databases merging, or at least sharing data? I would say that if you're the state administrator for IMAP invasives in Pennsylvania, that you ask the IMAP invasives program that question, because I would love to. Our data is freely available for anybody to have, but there's been a lot more limitations on them sharing data with other groups. And part of that is just the fee structure, I think, as well for IMAP invasives. You showed a couple of apps that are not listed under Bugwood apps. Can we see the titles and find these later? If you do a search on Google Play for Bugwood, and if you find the I've Got One app on the iPhone on iTunes, then there's a link that says Other Apps by Developer, and that will show you all the apps. We try to keep the apps.bugwood website up to date as much as possible, and I think most of them are listed there, but we'll check on that too to make sure they all are. So a question about the information finding its way to the plants database, and yes, we have been in continuous discussion. I mentioned the Biota North America project, and us sharing data back and forth with them, and we've been working with plants database since the beginning and finding ways to share data back and forth, and hopefully it's been more on their end than it has on our end in terms of just changing in their program to get the information to them and add it back into their database. One question was, our group can use an app that's a bit reversed to locate ash trees that are flowering and seeding, sent to an administrator who can use the information to collect seeds when they would ripen. A Seed Scout app might be useful for other trees and plants to help preservationists as well. Yeah, that's a great idea, and that's something this tree health app we're working on with the Nature Conservancy is going to do a little bit of that, but that might be something. Check with me, and that might be something we could look at integrating into that project. Yes, we are recording the webinar, and hopefully, other than the few technical glitches, we're recording it two different ways because of some of the problems that we've had with some of the other ones not syncing up. So it will be available as soon as we can possibly get it uploaded to YouTube, and we'll put it on the NISAW website as well. Where do I get the apps for my phone? Do I need the most updated version of iOS? We usually try to support a couple of versions back. Apple's making that more and more difficult to do, but you should be, if you're using an iPhone, you should be able to go to the App Store, and the easiest way is to search for I've Got One, and then, like I said, More Apps by Developer, and the other will show up. And saying British Columbia has tons of data, and yes, it's on my to-do list to get up with them and figure out a way to share that data with EDDMapS. Okay, species distribution modeling utility, that going back to the SDM question earlier. So there's been some work using some EDDMapS data out of University of Idaho to go along with some of that. Right now, because of the focus of our group being primarily on the outreach side of things, we're not really getting into modeling, but the data is obviously available for others to use and model. used for development of models, and hopefully we're going to have some projects over the next couple of years where other people will be doing modeling, and then we will be able to show those prediction layers on top of the EDDMapS data in order to show places that people may ought to look for species. And so I think I mentioned earlier, but this presentation, as well as all the webinars from this week, will be available on the NISAW.org website. And if you have any more questions or comments for me, please let me know, either in the question box now or after this is over. I know we've been going for a long time now, so we'll give it a few more minutes. If nobody has any questions, hopefully I clarified any questions y'all had, and looking forward to y'all testing out EDDMapS if you haven't seen it before, and please give us any feedback or comments to go along with that, and check out the other webinars. There's a few more for the IPM centers that are available on the NISAW website, both archived and as well as the ones the National Association of Invasive Plant Councils have done. So so I had a question about how about cryogenic species where we're not sure if they're native or not. We actually are going to be working with, well, I guess first of all, I'll say EDDMapS is pretty open in terms of if something is considered invasive in part of the country, but is native to another part of the country, it allows you to report it. So there is some flexibility there. And we are going to be working with a group out of Brown University that's going to be looking at species expansion of native species and integrating some of that data into EDDMapS as well. So, and thank y'all for the positive feedback. Anything else? And before we shut this down, I'm tired of hearing myself talk, so I'm sure everybody else is too.
I guess just a reminder for everyone to join us tomorrow at the same time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, for the Don't Move Firewood, What We Can Do for You by Lee Greenwood.
Yeah, I know it's Friday afternoon, but Lee does a great presentation, and if you don't know very much about that program, it's a really cool program, and they've got a lot of good educational materials to go along with it. So, thank y'all very much, and thanks for everybody who's participated in all these webinars this week. I think it's been a good success, and show that especially with the snow in DC, we can have a invasive species awareness week and get a lot of information out there without leaving our desks. So thank y'all very much.
Thanks, Chuck.